We don't do walk-ins on the showroom floor, ma'am. You'll want to make an appointment if you're serious about a purchase." Sandra Lowe said it without looking up from her tablet. Iris Fontaine said, "I'll wait." Sandra looked up then. She took in the faded fleece jacket, the jeans with a frayed hem at the right ankle, the drugstore reading glasses pushed up into gray-streaked brown hair. She took in the canvas grocery tote instead of a handbag. She took in the Honda Accord in the lot outside, the one parked slightly sideways, because the driver's side door had to be held open with your knee to catch the latch. "This is a Lexus dealership," Sandra said. "I know," Iris said. "I drive past it every morning on the way to work." Sandra smiled. It was the kind of smile that doesn't mean anything good. "And what is it you do, if you don't mind my asking?" "I sit," Iris said. What nobody in that showroom knew, what nobody ever knew, looking at Iris Fontaine on a Saturday morning in a fleece jacket, was that the courthouse on Millard Avenue was 4 blocks east of the dealership's glass front doors, and that she had walked those 4 blocks every weekday morning for 11 years. In winter, she wore a wool coat she'd bought on sale in 2018. In summer, linen blazers in pale colors that showed humidity sweat before she reached the corner. She carried that same canvas tote which held case files, a thermos, and a small leather wallet so worn the snap no longer closed all the way. The wallet had belonged to her father. Clement Fontaine had worked 31 years as a custodial supervisor at the Raleigh-Durham Airport. He mopped floors in Terminal 2 and trained younger men who sometimes moved on to other things and sometimes didn't. He woke at 4 in the morning 6 days a week and came home at 3 in the afternoon and sat at the kitchen table with a newspaper and coffee, so strong it left a permanent ring on the inside of the mug. He didn't talk much. When did, it mattered. He had said one thing to Iris the day she passed the bar exam. Not congratulations, not I'm proud of you, though he was. He pulled open his wallet, took out a $50 bill, folded it once, and held it out. "The best room in any building," he said, "is the one nobody expects you to walk into." He died in 2019, a stroke on a Tuesday, quiet. Iris kept the 50. It was still in the wallet, folded once, behind an expired library card she couldn't bring herself to throw away. She had become a United States District Court judge 6 years before he died. She never told him the exact salary. He just kept leaving $50 bills in birthday cards because that was what he had always done, and she had never once asked him to stop. The Accord in the parking lot had 211,000 miles on it. The front tire had been slow since February. Her law clerk, a young man named Rowan who had a habit of arriving early and leaving late, had leaned in her chamber doorway last week and said quietly, "Your Honor, that car is going to strand you on I-40. She told him she appreciated the concern. That was Friday. Saturday morning, she drove past the dealership and thought, "Today." She hadn't called ahead. Clement Fontaine had raised her to walk into rooms. Sandra Lowe had been head of sales at Pinnacle Lexus of Raleigh for 4 years. Before that, luxury retail in Charlotte. Before that, a private car concierge service in Atlanta where members paid 6 figures a year to have someone else handle everything. Across all of those positions, she had learned that there was a type of customer who walked in looking like a question mark and left having bought nothing. She had learned, in a more specific and dollar-denominated way, that time was the one resource she could not recover. She had a system. The industry word was qualifying. It was also a way of not calling it what it was. She looked at shoes first, then the bag, then the car in the lot if she could see it through the glass. A Saturday walk-in in athletic shoes and a canvas tote with a slow leak tire did not pass. She was wrong about 3% of the time. She did not think about the 3%. In the glass-walled office at the back of the floor, the general manager, Victor Parrish, watched Sandra intercept the walk-in near the entrance. He watched her posture, then the customer's posture, then nodded once and went back to his laptop. A young floor associate named Rowan Keel had reached Iris first, before Sandra cut across the floor. He was 24, 6 weeks into the job, and still believed it was possible to help every customer equally if you just tried hard enough. He had gestured toward the RX 350s on the main floor and asked what she was looking for. Sandra appeared at his shoulder. "Rowan, I have this one." Her voice was pleasant. Everything about Sandra Lowe was pleasant in a way that had edges underneath it. Rowan stepped back. He glanced at Iris, who was already reading the sticker in the nearest car's window, glasses down on her nose now, reading from the top the way someone works through a legal brief, systematically, not skipping anything. Sandra positioned herself alongside her. That model starts at $53,000. We do have pre-owned inventory on the back lot if... I'm not interested in pre-owned, Iris said. She kept reading. Does this trim include the heated steering wheel, or is that a package add-on? Sandra blinked. Package add-on. What's the markup on the package? I'd have to check. Is it factory installed or dealer installed? I'd have to check on that as well. Iris looked up. I'll sit down while you check. She moved to the seating area near the finance desk without waiting, set her tote bag in the adjacent chair, and pulled out a manila folder. Not her phone, a folder. She opened it and began reading, unhurried, the way someone reads when they have nowhere more important to be and are entirely sure of it. Sandra watched her for a moment. Then she walked to the finance desk, where a woman named Deborah was processing end-of-month paperwork. Sandra bent close and said something too quiet to carry across the floor. Deborah's eyes moved to Iris. She nodded. Rowan Keel picked up a cloth near the door and began polishing a side mirror on a display car that didn't need polishing. Sandra returned with a clipboard and a professional expression. Before we go any further, she said, setting the clipboard on the table, we do require a credit authorization for any vehicle over $45,000. It's standard for floor inventory. The form was already clipped to the top. Iris looked at it. Then she looked at Sandra. I haven't indicated intent to purchase yet. It's to confirm you're a serious buyer. We get a lot of foot traffic on Saturdays. Near an ES 350 across the floor, a woman in a gray blazer sat in a chair by the complimentary coffee station. She had a paper cup in her hand and had not looked at a single car since she arrived. She was looking at nothing in particular, which is what people look like when they are paying close attention to everything. Iris considered the authorization form. She picked up the pen, then she set it back down. I'd like to see the retail installment agreement, she said. Sandra's pleasantness developed a visible strain. We don't usually go to paperwork before. The standard retail installment agreement. The one your dealership uses for in-house financing. I'd like to read it before we proceed with anything else. That's not typically. You'd show it to me after an authorization and before a sale. That's still before I sign anything. I'd like to see it now. A pause. Sandra glanced toward the glass office. Victor Parrish had appeared in the doorway, arms folded. Sandra went to the file cabinet behind the finance desk and came back with 3 pages, standard weight, folded once. She set them on the table. Take your time, she said, and the way she said it meant the opposite. Iris unfolded the pages and placed them flat on the table. She put her reading glasses on. She started at the top. Page 1. She turned to page 3. She stopped. Line 14, it was not long and it was not dramatic in appearance. In a 9-point sans serif font it read, in consideration of this transaction, buyer agrees to resolve any and all disputes, claims, or controversies arising under or related to this agreement exclusively through binding individual arbitration pursuant to the American Arbitration Association commercial rules, and expressly waives any right to participate in any class or collective action. Iris read it twice. She had read it before. Not this exact copy, but these exact words, in this exact order, in this exact clause structure. She knew because she had a highlighted copy of the identical language sitting in a sealed exhibit binder on the credenza behind her desk at the courthouse, tagged as Plaintiff's Exhibit 7C, in a case that had been on her docket for 14 months. The case was styled United States v. Pinnacle Automotive Holdings, LLC. The dealership she was sitting in was called Pinnacle Lexus of Raleigh. She had driven past it every morning for 3 years and had never once connected the name above the door to the corporate defendant listed in her case files, because the case files used the holdings company name, and she had been thinking, most mornings, about other things. She had been thinking about the tire. She set the paper down very carefully. Outside, through the glass front of the building, Raleigh was moving through its Saturday morning. Slow traffic, heavy green light on the corner, people carrying coffee cups toward the farmer's market 2 blocks south. She could see the edge of the courthouse roofline from where she sat. She looked at the arbitration clause again. Then she looked at the credit authorization form Sandra had left on the table. An unauthorized credit pull on a consumer who had not indicated intent to purchase was a Fair Credit Reporting Act violation, the kind her courtroom had been handed documentation of across 11 Pinnacle-affiliated dealerships compiled as Plaintiff's Exhibits 12A through 12K. Iris took her reading glasses off and folded them. She thought of her father. Not the thing about the rooms, the other thing. The thing he had said when she was 16 and asked him what he did when someone treated him as less than he was. He had looked at her across the kitchen table and taken a sip of his terrible coffee. "You let them finish," he had said. "You let them show you everything they've got. Then you decide what to do with it." She put her glasses back on. She turned to page 1 and started over from the beginning. Sandra returned 10 minutes later with a young man in a security polo shirt. His name tag said Griffin. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to ask you to wrap this up. We have other customers waiting for this area." There were no other customers waiting for the area. All 6 chairs were empty. Iris looked at Griffin. "I'm reading a contract." "Ma'am." "A contract provided to me by your sales associate." She gestured toward Sandra at a careful distance. "I haven't been asked to leave by anyone with the authority to ask. I'm going to finish reading it." Griffin looked at Sandra. She gave him a small nod. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to." "What is the name of your general manager?" Iris said. Griffin stopped. "I can read it off his office door if you'd prefer." She looked directly at the glass office across the floor. "Mr. Parrish, Victor Parrish, is that correct?" The woman in the gray blazer by the coffee station turned her head, just slightly, toward the glass office. Victor Parrish in his doorway went still. "I'd like Mr. Parrish to come out here, please," Iris said, both hands flat on the table. "I have a question about this contract, specifically about line 14 of page 3. Parrish walked across the showroom floor the way men walk when they're not yet sure whether something is a problem or simply an inconvenience that needs managing. He was 52, silver-haired, in a suit that cost more than most people's monthly car payments. He had run Pinnacle Lexus of Raleigh for 9 years. He had settled 7 customer complaints without litigation, hired 4 sales managers who were exactly like Sandra Lowe, and authorized the switch to the Pinnacle Holdings Standard Retail Agreement 3 years ago, when corporate sent down the new template. He had read the template. He had not read it closely. He looked at Iris and saw what Sandra had seen. He did not revise his assessment. "What seems to be the problem here?" "Line 14 of page 3, Iris said. She held up the contract and put her finger under the clause. "This arbitration provision waives the buyer's right to class action participation. I'd like to know when your dealership adopted this language." Parrish frowned. "Our legal team reviews all of our agreements. Everything's in compliance." "With what standard?" Parrish blinked. It was a simple question. He did not have a simple answer ready. "Your corporate parent is Pinnacle Automotive Holdings," Iris said. "This language was drafted by their in-house counsel and distributed to affiliated dealerships in February of 2022. I know that because I have the distribution memo in my chambers at the courthouse." The showroom went quiet in a way it hadn't been before. "And who exactly are you?" Parrish said. His voice had changed. Iris reached into her tote bag. She placed 2 cards on the table, side by side. One was her State Bar card. The other had a federal seal on it. Parrish picked up the second card. He read it once. He read it again. His face did the thing faces do when something rearranges faster than the person expected. The woman in the gray blazer stood up from the coffee station. She was small, mid-40s, with the kind of posture that comes from years of standing in front of judges. She set her paper cup down and crossed the showroom floor without hurrying. She stopped beside Iris's table. "Petra Quinn," she said, "Assistant United States Attorney, Eastern District of North Carolina." She showed her credentials to Parrish, then turned them toward Sandra, who had gone the color of old paper. "I've been conducting intake interviews at Pinnacle-affiliated dealerships for 6 weeks, as part of an ongoing federal investigation into predatory lending and discriminatory consumer practices. I was here this morning to observe. She paused for just a moment. I've observed. Sandra's tablet slipped from her hand and hit the floor. She did not pick it up. Nobody leaves the building, Petra said to Griffin, who was still standing near the chairs. We're going to need written statements from floor staff. Victor Parrish sat down in one of the empty chairs. He sat in it the way a man sits when his legs have made a decision his mind hasn't accepted yet. Rowan Keel, near the front door, set down his polishing cloth. He exhaled. He looked at Iris the way someone looks at a person they realize they should have trusted from the beginning. Iris folded the retail installment agreement along its original crease and placed it back on the table. She removed her reading glasses. I'd still like to buy a car, she said, if someone can locate the fleet manager. By Tuesday, the regional news had the story in 4 short paragraphs beneath a headline about federal regulators. By Friday, Pinnacle Automotive Holdings had suspended operations pending compliance review at 4 North Carolina locations. Sandra Lowe's employment was terminated that same afternoon. Not by dealership management, but by the parent company's outside crisis counsel, who moved very quickly once they understood who had been sitting in that showroom chair. Victor Parrish's dealer operating license was suspended pending the outcome of the expanded federal case. He did not make a public statement. Petra Quinn's office filed amended charges that included Saturday's encounter as a documented instance of predatory customer screening, unauthorized credit inquiry, and attempted consumer intimidation. The showroom's own security cameras had recorded everything Sandra said and did. The footage was submitted as supplemental evidence. Rowan Keel was called to give a deposition. He gave it willingly, clearly, and in full. He found a different job the following month at a family-owned dealership across town that had nothing to do with Pinnacle, and stayed there for years. The fleet manager, a quiet man named Ed who had been in the service bay since the moment Victor Parrish's face went pale, sold Iris a slate gray RX 450H for $11 under MSRP and thanked her 3 separate times. She drove it home that afternoon, the Accord she left with a mechanic on Blount Street who had been keeping it running for 6 years. She told him to do whatever he wanted with it. On the passenger seat of the new car, on the drive home, was her father's wallet. She had taken it out of the tote and set it there without quite deciding to, the way you reach for something you've always reached for. She thought about what Iris Fontaine would have said about the day. She thought he probably wouldn't have said much. He would have sat at the kitchen table with the newspaper and his ring-stained mug and nodded once and gone back to reading. She thought he might have smiled, though, just a little. The way he smiled when something worked out the way it was supposed to, not with surprise, but with a quiet, deep, already knew-it satisfaction. She drove home with the windows down. The April air in Raleigh smelled like pine and cut grass, and someone grilling somewhere 2 streets over, and she thought it was a good day to buy a car. If this story stayed with you, drop a comment and tell us about a time someone looked right at you and got you completely wrong, and what happened when the truth came out. Share this with someone who has ever been made to feel like they don't belong in the room. And if you're new to Velvet Reckoning, subscribe, because we will be here every week, telling the stories about the people nobody saw coming.